Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even bring my phone up here to take Q&A because Brian and I are talkers and we are unlikely to have a lot of time left over. So we're gonna dive right into it. Here's our agenda. So we have a video that we're gonna roll for you in just a moment. As I promised earlier, I'm going to show you my results from the potential role finder. And then if you were left wanting more, talking about the NICE framework, Brian is going to dig a little bit more into how to actually use it. He talks with and works with career changers and job seekers all the time, so he can give you a little bit more nuance there. I feel like we've done a pretty good job today already representing some of the other job roles, but what I call cyber adjacent, but I'll just highlight a few more of those, and then Brian will talk about certs. Do we care? Do they matter? I know you just heard these guys say, certs aren't that important anymore, and then other people are like, well, how do I show what I know if I don't have certs? So Brian will answer those questions for us. All right, you guys, will you roll Oliver's video?
Hello, I'm Dr. Oliver Waddup and I'm a data scientist at Potential. I'm here to tell you a little bit about Potential Role Finder, what it is, why we created it, and most importantly, how we can help you realize your potential in cybersecurity. Potential Role Finder is an assessment tool that helps you find your career path in cybersecurity. We ask a number of questions about your likes, dislikes, interests, experience, and strengths. Combined, your answers will provide us with a snapshot that will enable us to show you how you can harness everything you already have to be able to take on a role in cybersecurity. We'll be able to tell you what you're strongest in and what areas you need to focus on to maximise your existing abilities, skills and knowledge. We know that there is a growing shortage of workers in the cybersecurity industry. Researchers estimated that this workforce gap sits in the millions, so it's vitally important that we can recruit more people into the industry. We also know that many people feel swamped with information when looking to start their cyber career, and it's simply inaccessible without prior knowledge. Our tool aims to change that. So, we developed a Potential Role Finder to show people from outside of cybersecurity what transferable skills they have to be used within our industry. We loosely based Potential Role Finder on the NICE framework, but we also added insights from our own experience, as well as the experience of SANS experts in the field. So far, we've tested hundreds of people, and we're working hard to ensure that we have no biases with regards to gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. There are so many great roles in cybersecurity and a variety of paths to take. You don't need to be a coder or a data enthusiast like me. Everyone has strengths, weaknesses, and transferable skills, whether you know it or not. Potential Role Finder will give you easy to digest information about how to take your first steps into cybersecurity. You'll be given a link to follow. Enter your name and email, and then we'll send you a personalised link to your email address. This usually takes a minute or so to appear in your inbox. Once you've completed that, you'll begin answering the questions. They should take around 30 minutes to complete. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. After you've completed Potential Role Finder, you'll get a simple, personalised report based on the answers you provided. You'll also be able to download the report for your own records. In the report, you'll first learn about your highest scoring competencies. These are the things needed in cybersecurity that you're particularly good at. Using these scores, we then recommend some courses that support career development and some career focus areas for you to explore. Finally, at the end of the report, we provide a detailed breakdown of how you score across all of the competency areas, as well as some additional information about what each of these competency areas are. For the more curious, we also provide the opportunity to learn more about a particular career pathway or course to learn. You can take your first step into your cybersecurity career by using the link or QR code displayed. Thank you very much for listening, and we wish you all the very best in starting your cyber career.
Give you a second to get that QR code, and we will post that up also. Thank you. All right. So now I will reveal my own potential results. So the reason that this all ties in with NIST, NICE framework is because that is what the personality assessment is mapping to. So I have to say that I think the assessment is dead on for my personal competencies and everybody else on my team who's taken it, who shared their results with me. So it sort of says that my competencies are knowledge management, organizational awareness, interpersonal skills, learning focus. You will see that I don't have any of the analytical data focus type ones, and that is very accurate. For my focus areas, okay, so I'm high in creative thinking, change tolerance, and communication, low in critical reasoning, analytic focus. Absolutely true. One note here, one of the categories or focus areas is ethics. If you score low on ethics, please do not be alarmed or insulted. It was not one of my high scoring areas, and that's so James Line specifically wanted us to say it doesn't mean you're unethical. It just it's sort of more like your adherence to procedure, and do you think that you have to cross every T and dot every I, or do you think that there should be flexibility in the way you approach problem solving? So clearing that up. Then I get to my course recommendations, and it told me to take 504. And I'll be honest, this was like a little sad trombone because that's not really my area of expertise or of interest, frankly. And I'm telling you this because it's in beta. We're still learning from it. Over 400 of you have taken it over just the last couple days in preparation for this event, and that's helping us get smarter all the time. But if you get a similar result, if you go through all this and you're like, that's me, yes, that's what I'm good at, that's what I'm not good at, that's what I like, and then you get a course recommendation that you're like, wah, 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 just stick with us. We're gonna talk a lot more about courses now, and we'll be here to talk about it later on all day. So we're still learning on that, and don't be discouraged by that. I think that the assessment is a great tool to get you started, and not all the course recommendations are gonna totally land for you just yet, but that's okay. We're getting better at it. Oops, I just skipped over your whole slide there, Brian. I'm gonna pass this to Brian.
No problem.
They'll turn up the volume when you start.
Okay, test, test. Test, test. Better. Better, okay, we're getting there.
What number are you? He's number 10.
All right. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go ahead and talk anyway. I have a loud voice. So thank you very much, Jennifer. So first off, I wanted to say thank you, Jennifer, for putting this all together. I mean, I think this has been an amazing New to Cyber Summit. So I wanted to start off with that. So today I'm going to be talking about, I know resources keeps coming up of what are the resources in the industry? What can I do? So I'm going to first start off by a thing called cyberseek.org, which actually the NICE team has put together. What it does is it actually gives you a heat map of what jobs are available around the country and even divvies it up based on states. And so if you see on here, these are just some examples of some jobs that are actually out there. You were able to hear from some of the folks earlier today when they talked about the different positions, anything from a security architect or a vulnerability assessment analyst that you actually see out there on the NICE framework. So I'm gonna go ahead. Oops. All right. So we got to hear earlier today, just a little bit ago, from Rodney and Davina and Tasha about the NICE framework, what it is, things along those lines. So I wanted to talk to you just about how to use it, as I'm using two mics here at the same time. So, the broad definition is when it comes to the NICE framework, it is the US government coming in and defining the roles within cybersecurity, right? The goal is, and that's been done before in other industries, whether it was a doctor or a lawyer, things along those lines. But the idea is that everybody is not necessarily a cybersecurity professional. Now, you could have multiple roles, especially if you're in a small organization, but the idea is defining what those roles are so that sectors can work together and they're all defining exactly the same. As crazy as it sounds, you may have an organization like Amazon that will have potentially anywhere from 10 to 30 security teams, and even within Amazon, they haven't defined those security roles all together the same way. So the nice thing about the NICE framework is it's starting to get to a standardized language that'll be able to do it. So think of it in some ways as a doctor being a brain surgeon, a pediatrician. In our industry, it could be anything from a cybercrime investigator, a CISO, things along those lines. So when you look at and this is the way I try to explain the NICE framework, is think of it in some ways as like a pyramid. So in the top of the pyramid is kind of the work role categories and specialty areas, right? So they're kind of like the definitions of what the work roles fall under. So it could be like a software development, security architecture, management. Now you have the work roles. So for example, we could use cybercrime investigator as a perfect example. So within that, you have what is called the TSKs. So think of it as some ways, think of it as like a pyramid, and I use sometimes the example of a welder. So what are the tasks that the welder needs to do to be able to do the job? That's what you often see on job descriptions. The skills are, what are the skills that a welder needs to do to be able to do the tasks? So as we're working down the pyramid a little bit. And then at the very bottom is, what is the knowledge that that welder needs to have to be able to do the job? So think of it in some ways as knowledge as being, what is metal? What is a hammer? Skills could be, how do I use the hammer? And then the task is, how do I build the metal and things along those lines? So if you see on here, these are some examples of just kind of the various categories that are out there. And it kind of explains what's out as far as anything from analyze, collect and operate, investigate, operate and maintain. And I know one of them that we talked about earlier today was to protect and defend. So if you see on here, here's some examples of a cyber defense analyst. So you can see on here how it's all divvied up. There's 33 tasks, 15 skills, 70 knowledge areas. So it kind of gives you an example of what everything is. So think of it at the top of the pyramid again, task, not skills, and then knowledge. Now I'm going to go back to Jennifer, and we're going to go ahead.
Yeah.
And I'm so popular, I have 2 microphones.
But I have one that works. I will actually just take the clicker back from you for just a second. So
Sure.
one,
Or should I just put it on the floor?
oh, the clicker. One of the things that I am very partial to is our management or our cybersecurity leadership curriculum. And so I've said several times today that I am only cyber adjacent. Emily actually mentioned that I'm working on my master's degree in cyber psychology, which is largely about human behavior and how we interact with technology, and behavior change is a huge part of that. So the one SANS cert that I do hold is the SSAP, which is the SANS Security Awareness Professional. And that is our Management 433 class. So if you are listening to all this and you're like, this is great, but I'm more into like human behavior, or I'm a communications professional, or I used to work in HR, or I'm a graphic designer. Trust me, this is a place for you. Security awareness officers are in all large enterprises. And so there's a lot of creativity in this field, a lot of human behavior. I have just a quick screenshot here of Dr. Jessica Barker, who is one of my favorite people in the security awareness field. She's great. And she has all kinds of little quick videos on YouTube. And I'll put a link to her YouTube when I get back to my computer. But I would definitely go ahead and look up Dr. Jessica Barker and look at the SSAP if you feel like this is something that is for you. And I don't feel like within the framework, it's entirely clear where people who have this sort of interest fall. So that's why I wanted to highlight this. Wow, I'm going backwards now too. So GRC, I was afraid we weren't going to talk about it, but we have talked about it quite a lot today. So I don't feel like I need to spend too much time on this again, but I did want to highlight that at last year's New to Cyber Summit, we had a really great overview talk on GRC careers. The link is there. We'll also put it in the Slack. So Talia Parker gave a great overview of that for people who are new to cyber. And so, yeah, it's all great. We say you don't have to be that technical, and there's a big need for it. But if you don't know how to get started, it's still overwhelming. So Talia will help you out there. We've also talked about cloud quite a lot. And cloud touches everything. Cloud is in healthcare, it's in retail, it's in hospitality, it's in education. Everybody is in the cloud or moving to the cloud. That's where all our data is. And we've got a whole curriculum on cloud, but I wanted to quickly highlight the Cloud Diversity Academy. SANS has just partnered with Google. We just opened up the applications for this last week. You still have a month to apply. So the links are here. We'll put them in Slack. If you think you might qualify for the SANS and Google Cloud Diversity Academy, I would encourage you to go check it out and apply. And that's a great opportunity where you get 3 courses and certifications, totally scholarship based, and then there's career placement and counseling, and it's just an excellent opportunity that I'm excited to tell you about. Lastly, the other thing I think we haven't much talked about is ICS. I think this was on your bingo card, but it is Industrial Control Systems. I am not the one to explain to you exactly what ICS means, but it is basically all of the systems that keep us safe. In ICS, they will often talk about operational technology or OT and how it works with IT. So these are things that you really, really would like to know are safe, like nuclear power plants, the power grid, wastewater treatment plants. So it's an important area. And I've highlighted on here from our last New to Cyber, we had Gabe Agbarucci did a great talk about ICS careers. We'll give you the link to that. And we do have a summit coming up specifically on ICS. It is in Orlando at the beginning of May. And we've partnered with Dragos. We're going to do 12 scholarships to that summit. And we have the link here for you to apply. So it will cover the registration fee for the summit and also airfare and hotel, 2 nights in hotel, I think, to attend the summit.
Disney World.
And it is at Disney World.
It's at Disney World.
It
At
is
the
at the
Contemporary.
Contemporary Resort on the Disney property, which is as close to the Magic Kingdom as you can get without, living in Cinderella's castle. And so that is going to be for people who are new to and curious about ICS and do not yet have an employer who would cover your costs to go there. So thank you to Dragos for partnering with us to make that happen. And that was all the stuff I wanted to cover. So I'm going to kick it back to Brian. So certifications, we've been talking about this. Some people said certs are a great way to show what you know. Other people are like, you don't need certs anymore. So clear it up for us.
Yeah, and when it comes to certifications, there's not a one-fit-all philosophy. Now, when it comes to certifications, in some ways, I believe it's been given a little bit of a bad name. And part of the reason behind that is certification's been tied a little bit to the knowledge areas. So what is a pen tester? Not necessarily how do I become a pen tester, how do I actually do that particular job, right? So one thing that we really try to do over here at GIAC is really kind of do the skills validation. We really try to emphasize that when it comes to that. So sometimes when people always say, hey, what does certification do? Sometimes there's an interpretation that it means I'm an expert. Certification, what it is a baseline skills validation. So sometimes what I try to do is compare it with other industries. So CPA is a perfect example. It doesn't mean that I'm the best accountant in the world. It doesn't mean I'm the worst accountant in the world. However, it becomes a baseline that people on projects use when they hire. Another perfect example is a driver's license, something as simple as that, right? It doesn't mean that I'm an amazing driver. It doesn't mean I'm a poor driver. But I like to believe everybody here in this audience wants to know that we do require people to have a driver's license, right? Like we just don't let people out on the road. You understand what a red light is, what a green light is, things along those lines. And in some ways, I kind of look at cybersecurity. Really, in some ways, we're not a special snowflake. We're no different than any other industry, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, things along those lines. What it really does is it really shows that you can do the actual skills that are out there. So when I'm a doctor, I have a license. When I'm a lawyer, I have a license. Oftentimes you would say to yourself, why don't you see that here in cybersecurity? And pretty much the main reason why is our industry just changes so frequently. And think of it in some ways, like the human body doesn't really change. The technology around it does, but same with law, right? Yes, law does change a little bit, but the Declaration of the Constitution, things along those lines, law only changes so much over time. But cybersecurity, there's also just so many specialized fields, things along those lines, things like that. So, in some ways, you kind of look at it that way, where a cybersecurity professional is no different than another industry. So a doctor could be like a pediatrician, brain surgeon, radiologist. In ours, it could be a cybercrime investigator, information system security manager, a security architect. Now, one thing that's really nice about certification is it makes sure that people retain the material. So what I mean by that is that if you've ever listened to a webcast or you ever listen to something, science has shown that you retain, and you definitely retain something, anywhere between 10 to 40%. However, when you're being tested on it, the retention rate goes way up, upwards of 70% and above. So I know that may seem like common sense, but it's one of those things that really certification really comes into play with. And so accreditation, so you hear about accreditation, and I know a lot of times people are confused what it means. You know, accreditation does not mean tied into the course material as far as, and the testing as far as the quality necessarily of the questions, what it's tied into. And so the big term that you hear over here is ISO 1724, and that can hit other industries, is it's built to show inclusivity and fairness in the testing process. So what I mean by that is we actually have a whole team full of people here at GIAC. What they're doing is they're doing psychometrics when it's tied into making sure that 100% of the students don't pass that exam, but also 10%. They're also making sure that certain segments that testing process is equal for everybody. So whether it's male, female, whether it's different parts of the world. So a perfect example was we had a series of questions that did very well, pretty much across the board until it got to the Middle East. For some reason, there was something in those questions that tripped where the passing rate went way, way down. They actually had to throw out those questions. So the idea behind accreditations, it's making sure that there's exclusivity, there's making sure that there's fairness built into the system. And so when people always say, why does certification matter to employers? It allows them to be a trusted source to their clients. So if I'm, for example, Cisco, my sales engineers, if they all have a certification to kind of back up that they have a security skill set that allows them to do it beyond Cisco products, it's protecting assets to board and stakeholders. It's tied into anything from audits. You're starting to see legislation. There's a big legislation out of the EU right now. It just went live on January 16th. It's required that everybody has to be compliant. That's the EU nation by October 2024. It's tied into anything with critical infrastructure, which I know, Jennifer, you just talked about. So that's water treatment, healthcare, financial, tech. They have to do a whole bunch of things where they could be fined, from reporting to what the skill sets of their workers are, down to cyber incidents. And you're even starting to see it in now stockholders. So this US Stock Exchange out of Wall Street actually has a proposal. One of the ideas that will go live here in April, we'll see if that actually really does happen. My guess is it will probably be postponed. But think back into, if anybody's a shareholder here, you probably receive a financial report that's tied to your shareholder. And that goes back to the Great Depression of making sure that all these publicly traded companies actually have listed on there how they're incorporating their financials, like how they're auditing their systems. They're looking to do the same thing, except now in the world of cybersecurity, with the idea that it can affect a stock exchange and can affect the shareholders. So those type of things is they're asking that each publicly traded company have somebody on the board with cyber experience. They're also asking that, what is your security team's expertise? They're also asking things along the lines of, how do you handle a cyber incident? How do you report that? What's your risk management? Things along those lines. So, So why GX certification? So we've actually granted over 200,000 plus credentials up to date. We have 45 certifications. They're tied into work roles, oftentimes to the NICE framework. One thing that I really like to think that separates us a little bit in the marketplace, and I'll be the first to admit I'm biased, is that we actually have a thing called Cyber Live. What CyberLive is think of labs now incorporated into exams, as opposed to multiple choice, with the idea that we're not testing on knowledge, we're really testing on skills. So it could be like go into a virtual machine and do the following 8 things that are tied into it. So we actually have that incorporated into quite a bit of our exams. We're going to be adding it to about half our exams by the end of this year. As you can imagine, that was very, very, very difficult to do, simply because there was nobody we could hire in the marketplace to do that. So we had to build that all internally. One thing that we also do is, because SANS and GIAC are very big on real world skills, we actually update our certifications, just like our courses, anywhere at least once a year up to multiple times a year. We are also accredited. We have a whole staff of people. That's all they do all day long, is actually look at those questions to make sure that there's no bias, there's fairness in the system, things along those lines. And one thing that I did want to end with a little bit with our certification is we do actually have a graduate undergraduate program here. It is fully accredited. We're actually licensed here in this home state of Maryland. It's done through Middle States. So if you look at Johns Hopkins down the street, they also have a Middle States. You do receive certifications as you go through that program. So as opposed to getting an A, B, C, D, you actually get certifications with it. So I did want to highlight some SANS resources. And I know, Jennifer, you already talked about some of these. Some of these have already come up, but I just have to keep throwing them out there. So one that I really love is CyberAces. It's actually free training that's out there for the community. You can pull it up at any moment, cyberaces.org. Give you an idea, we thought nobody was using it because we had it so buried on the SANS website, until somebody got to stats and realized that we had still thousands of students going through it pretty much daily. So since that time, we've actually updated it. It's with SANS instructors. I actually think it's just as good as any SANS instruction that's out there. We have a ton of free resources. The summit today is just a perfect example, and we have tons of other summits, anywhere from an awareness summit to a pen test hackfest summit to forensics. I know I'm forgetting neurodiversity. The list goes on and on. We also have webcasts, reading rooms, tools. We also maintain the early warning system in the what I consider our industry. So I kind of consider it kind of like the CNN, say, / Fox News of what updates are out there that are printed at any time. So just to give you an idea, Microsoft actually has a full staff of folks that actually watch that Internet Storm Center. So give you an idea, when you see your patch on Tuesday, a lot of times it's found on this ICS. Now, one thing that I think is really exciting is we do have a SANS Foundations. We've just built that. We have a certification that's tied with it. I think what's great about our SANS Foundations is that it does also teach you skills along with knowledge, even as a foundational course. Now, if we have anybody in the audience today that's going through a college program, we do actually have free training called Cyber Fast Track. If you're in high school or you work with high schools, we also have, and I think Tavina was the one that mentioned it, we have a program called Cyber Start America. So you'll see on there. We also have a series of free academies. We have ones for vet success. We have some for women. We have some for diversity. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. But these academies oftentimes include multiple courses and certifications free for the community. They're meant for somebody who's changing their careers. So I think it's something that's really exciting that's actually out there. Now, if you ever wanted to come to a SANS conference and actually help us out, we do have what's called a work-study program. And I think that work-study program, people love it because they get to spend a lot of time with our instructors, and they really get to be kind of like they really get to help them out secondhand. And it's kind of fun, like you become part of the staff. So you get to work with cool people like Jennifer. So, and if you see on here, we have the EDU program. Now, I was going to finish up. We have some great industry resources, so I was going to give my personal highlights. So one of them is the NICE website. Why I love the NICE website? Because it has a whole listing of all these amazing resources all in one place. So if I want to find out, as opposed to Googling and spending hours and hours and hours, a lot of times I would just say, go to the NICE website. You'll find a ton of stuff just available there alone. We see some women in cybersecurity, I know it keeps coming up. They actually did a whole series of videos on these various work roles. They're very slick, they're very well done. There's also write-ups, things along those lines. CyberSeek, which tells you about the different jobs in the industry. Now, when it comes to certification, people say, well, how does GIAC fit in with AWS and CompTIA and ISC Squared and ISACA? A good website for you to turn to is Paul Jeremy. I think it's one that's really, really excellent. There's another one called the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Careers and Studies. It's actually done through CISA. I'm sure everybody's heard in this room who CISA is. I think that's a great, great resource. And I was going to finish up, you know, some things that are really exciting, and I know some of the people talk about. There is actually a US Cyber Games. And there's actually even an international competition. It's something you may want to look at and participate in. I think it's an amazing resource. The people that put that together do a really, really, really good job. And I know, Jennifer, I went over, so.
I knew you would.
Yeah, I kind of knew we both would.
It's
So.
Just two quick things I wanted to leave us with. All of this CERT information is amazing. And at the Neurodiversity and Cybersecurity Summit that we're doing next month, which will also be free and virtual, we are going to have somebody from the GIAC team, Adam, who will talk about different accommodations. So if you are neurodivergent and you are like, I know all this material backwards and forwards, but I need these different setups for test taking success, we can accommodate that. And you can hear a lot more about that next month. Also, if you haven't taken the potential role finder, or if you have and you have questions, there is a channel in the Slack called Potential Role Finder, I think. And our teammates are based in the UK, so it might not be synchronous, but Dr. Waddup and Amy and Rach and Luke have worked really, really hard to put this together. They're really interested in your feedback. We're gonna ask for some of your feedback on the eval form that I hope you will all fill out at the end of the day. So if you wanna dig into that anymore, it's gonna continue to be available, and the Slack will be available for a whole week so you can get support and get questions answered from the people who know what they're talking about. So, all right, let's take a break.